on the Shelter Assistance Fund or that application, or if it does, just very, very briefly. So for agencies just interested in that, this also, again, may not be the most relevant, but for everybody else who's here about the upcoming competition for the Emergency Solutions Grant, fantastic and welcome. My name is Amber Lewis. I, manage the homeless programs here at the Iowa Finance Authority. And with me, who won't do too much today, but Carol Vipond is our newest team member in the homelessness department. So she's very, very new. So we won't ask a whole lot of her today, but she's here also. And let's see, as for logistics of the webinar today, please feel free to submit any questions you have in the question box. You can use the chat box at the right as well. And let's see, the audio, we're doing it just a little bit differently with the phone. I'm not sure how that will work if you want to ask a question. We can try that if you want to use the audio question function. But certainly we can see the what you submit in the question box as far as written questions, so feel free to use that. And we will go ahead and begin. Also, one more quick note. If you've done one of these before from a previous competition, it'll be very, very familiar. So just kind of updating things for this year. So let's see, we will record the webinar. That's already going and in place, and we'll post the webinar later on our website, and we'll also make the slides available. And of course, always our disclaimer, the information is with a complex program like ESG, it cannot cover everything, and certainly when in doubt, as we always do, we defer to the federal regulations, so please do as well. Okay, we'll cover general ESG, very, very high-level overview of ESG. We'll cover this competition, and we'll cover the application process itself. Oh, okay, jumping too fast. Okay, I think this is next up. This is where you find information about the ESG program on our website. So if you've navigated through our website at all before, it's iowafinanceauthority.gov here up top, and you can get to one of the homelessness program or one of the homelessness pages by several of these toolbars at the top. And when you're actually online, there'll be drop-down lists here, and just get to something that says homelessness, and you'll get to this page, and you can navigate to the Emergency Solutions Grant here on the left. This is not what it looks like right now. Either later this afternoon or tomorrow, we will update this with information about the competition being open, because as of today, it essentially is open for the new year. So, okay, general ESG. So the purpose of the ESG program, it is a federal program of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and the goal, of course, is to assist people to quickly regain stability in permanent housing after experiencing a housing crisis and or homelessness. And there is a never-ending amount of information online at HUD's website about ESG, and that's where you can find all that good information here. So if you're new to the ESG program entirely, I really would recommend starting there. There are some great webinars that are just a general overview of what HUD intends for this program. Certainly the interim regulations that we operate under and all kinds of other stuff is right at this link. Okay, what is ESG as far as eligible applicants? So to apply, you have to be an agency located in Iowa, serving Iowa, either general purpose local government, meaning like a city or a county, cannot be a public housing agency or PHA, or you can be a private nonprofit agency that is authorized to do business and recognized by the Iowa Secretary of State. Okay, projects must serve clients that qualify as homeless, and we use HUD's lengthy and strict definition for that, which can be found at the 24 CFR or Code of Federal Regulations, Part 91, or the definition for at risk of homelessness. And so that's the citation for that definition. They both are, again, lengthy. You need to be very, very careful that you're that the clients you're serving qualify under HUD's definition in order to use ESG funds in support of such clients. So let's see, move on there. What is ESG? What are the goals of ESG? And so that's where we go back to the HEART Act. And probably most of you on the phone are familiar with that, but that's the, let's see, Homeless Emergency Assistance and Rapid Transition to Housing Act back in 2009 is when our federal legislators got together to pass the HEARTH Act to update our homelessness legislation federally, and so that's where the ESG program comes out of. What the HEARTH Act is focused in on, and therefore what ESG is also focused in on, are these indicators here. So we are looking at the length of time homeless, and of course we want to be reducing the length of time that individuals or families spend homeless. We're looking at recidivism, or subsequent returns to homelessness after someone has exited out of homelessness. We're looking at access or coverage, so we want to make sure that we're thorough in reaching persons who may need assistance. And that could include geography, it could include different demographic types, just different folks in need anywhere in our state. Another item, overall reduction in number of persons who experience homelessness. Let's see, looking at job and income growth for persons who are homeless. Also looking at a reduction in overall the number of individuals and families who become homeless for the first time. And then other accomplishments could be fairly broad. So these are kind of large goals. They're also system-wide goals, so it's not any individual program or agency that may do all of these, but certainly we're looking for programs that contribute overall to these goals. All right, eligible activities. What can you do with ESG? So street outreach is one. So we only have probably 1 or 2 agencies or programs that do this each year with ESG funds. But these are the agencies that, that actually go try to find people out camping or in their cars or otherwise, unsheltered and sleeping in places not meant for human habitation, as Ted would put it. And so agencies that are helping connect those individuals to services, helping them make good referrals and helping them get the services they need to hopefully get at least sheltered. And then shelter would be the next category, and so generally we think of that as emergency or short-term shelter. We'll talk a little later on about how transitional shelter can fit in with that. Also looking at homelessness prevention. Now HUD really kind of has de-emphasized homelessness prevention with ESG. I think the thinking there being that as long as there are people who actually are homeless, then we should focus our limited resources on those persons rather than doing too much in the way of homelessness prevention. But it is eligible. Rapid rehousing, certainly a huge push federally. That's been consistent for several years now that HUD is really looking to expand rapid rehousing, and ESG is one way that they support that. Data collection and reporting, that is an eligible use of ESG funds. So agencies can use up to 5% of a grant in any year to assist with data collection and reporting functions. And then an agency can also apply for ESG funds to help with administration of the ESG program. It's limited, I think it's about 2% that we'll allow there. And then it's not covered here because it's not really a separate eligible activity, but we do support indirect costs with ESG as well. Okay, let's back up a little bit and go. I guess I kind of touched on some of the details with each one of these, but to review, so street outreach, again, that's for unsheltered homeless persons. Let's see, providing urgent, non-facility-based care to unsheltered persons. It's based on Category 1 of HUD's definition of homelessness. And for those that are familiar, and certainly if you get an ESG grant, you're going to want to become familiar, but HUD has 4 categories in their definition of homelessness. This is about Category 1, literally homeless or unsheltered. And a couple examples there of things you can do with street outreach funds. Okay, next up we have shelter. And that is going to include essential services for clients that are staying at the shelter. So that would very frequently include case management, child care, education services, employment assistance and job training, outpatient health services, legal services, life skills training, mental health services, substance abuse treatment, transportation, and services for special populations. So as you can see, a wide variety of eligible activities there. And so often a question we get is, can the ESG grant help pay for funds for staff, as in like case managers and advocates? And yes, it certainly can. Another kind of broad category within shelter is operations for emergency shelters. So this isn't the direct services for clients, but this is all the many necessary activities to keep your doors open and keep it a safe place. And so that would include maintenance, rent on your shelter, security, fuel, equipment, insurance, utilities, food, furnishings, and supplies. Again, supplies for the shelter. Those are all fully acceptable under ESG, and no particular limits within any of these sort of subcategories either. Under operations for emergency shelters, we also can allow hotel or motel vouchers, and that's only if there's no appropriate emergency shelter that's available. So maybe if the shelter is, that could be one reason it's not available. If there's no shelter in the immediate vicinity, maybe you're in a rural area and there's no emergency shelter that's reasonably available close by, then that could be also another reason. And so again, kind of limited here, but we can do some hotel or motel vouchers there. And for shelters, so that would be categories 1, 2, 3, or 4 of HUD's definition of homelessness. If someone comes to the door of a shelter, we kind of assume they have nowhere else to go, and so they kind of fit as homeless. Okay, transitional housing and shelter. HUD has certainly moved in the last few years away from wanting to do a lot to support transitional housing. And so I know that's kind of a fraught issue and question, and it's lots of ongoing debate about that. And certainly there are different kinds of transitional housing programs or transitional shelter programs. Some just target the general population. Some are very specialized for youth, for kind of recovery centers. So lots of different kinds. But the bottom line is currently HUD does allow transitional shelters or housing to still access ESG funds only if they were funded as an ESG program back in 2010. So that was the year when HUD did their interim regulations. That was the year that they selected to sort of grandfather in such programs to continue to receive ESG. That could change. It certainly, we're just under interim regulations, and so we'll see where that goes. We're also certainly interested here at ISA to hear from programs, to hear from COCs, from communities on how we can best utilize these limited funds. So may not always be the case, but still for this year we are in a place where we are allowing transitional shelters that were funded previously in 2010. Okay. Moving on from there, ESG, homelessness prevention and/or rapid rehousing. And so homelessness prevention, we're looking at categories 2, 3, or 4 of HUD's definition of homelessness. And we have a link there in the slides to HUD's definition. And could also be the at-risk of homelessness definition. There are kind of 3 categories there, I believe. For rapid rehousing, it's just category 1, the definition. And I am going to stop in just a moment here and check to see if we have any questions. I'll do just a couple more slides before we do that. Okay, as far as more of the details about homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing, we can support rental assistance through these activities. And so this can be short-term rental assistance, medium-term, or it can also be arrears if someone's behind a few months on their rent. And that's going to be the difference between them becoming homeless or not. And so let's see, as far as kind of longer-term rental assistance, since we're doing annual grants for the ESG program, it doesn't work real well to do longer than a year, even though HUD will allow it. I would say most programs right now with rapid rehousing do probably an average about 6 months of assistance. Keep in mind, it shouldn't be a set program where everybody that's approved for the program gets the same amount of assistance, since, of course, everybody's situation is unique. So lots more to talk about there, but again, this is just kind of meant as a high-level overview, so we'll move on from there. Other types of assistance allowable through homelessness prevention or rapid rehousing would be financial assistance. So that could cover rental application fees, security deposits, last month's rent, utility deposits, utility payments, or moving costs. So quite a variety of eligible activities there. And then the last category within, or the last type of eligible assistance here under these categories would be housing relocation and stabilization services. And so the types of things we would see there are housing search and placement. Maybe your case manager or advocate is helping someone find a place to meet their needs. Housing stability case management, mediation, legal services, or credit repair, all eligible here. Okay, program regulations. So there are a lot. It is a complex federal program, of course. We'll go over some of the key program requirements, but we're not going to go in depth. So I want to point you to where you can find more information. So at our ESG page online, now again, we're going to update this today or tomorrow with some of the information we've talked about here, including these slides, including several items for the 2017 program, but it is at this page of our ESG files at the IFA website. Okay, and so let's see, requirements. So again, since we really don't have time to go in depth on all the requirements, I think one great way for an agency that doesn't receive a current grant, a great way to learn more about what will be required if you are awarded funds would be to view the ESG training webinar that current grantees went through for the current year. And so let's just double check that this link here works. We'll get us there. Okay, so when you get to our ESG pages, and this is again what we've talked about, this is for the 2017 program, and there will be lots more information here in the coming day or so. But that webinar or the presentation I was just referring to is at the 2016 program, that's the current year. If you click on this one here, ESG 2016 training presentation, it's a much lengthier presentation, and that will give you kind of more details on what it actually looks like to administer a grant. So if you're not sure, if you've maybe done the Shelter Assistance Fund program before, or if you're a new agency entirely, really would highly recommend viewing this one here. The last thing we want is any surprises, you know, any agency being awarded a grant and then not feeling totally prepared to meet the requirements. So please take a look there. Okay, let's see. I think we were right here. All right. So we'll just very, very briefly touch on some of those requirements, and again, you can find more information elsewhere. So shelters, you're going to want to be aware there are requirements for lead-based paint visual assessments and compliance. There are habitability standards. There is a prohibition against involuntary family separation based on the ages of children. So for example, you can't say we serve children in our shelter, but not, you know, males over the age of 13, which, you know, we used to see. I don't think we see that too much anymore in Iowa, but that's not allowed under federal rule. Homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing. For all assistance provided, there are requirements to do income calculations, and then there are, of course, limitations on income. Which the basic limitation is no more than 30% of the area median income. There is an exception for doing an income assessment at intake for rapid rehousing only. There are monthly case management requirements. There are client recertification requirements for ongoing assistance. There are restrictions on the use of assistance with other kinds of subsidies. There are limitations on the period of assistance. There are lead-based paint visual assessments and compliance with individual units that you're assisting folks to stay in. And there are habitability standards for those individual units as well. And additional requirements, if providing rental assistance, then you would have to do, then you have to follow the requirements for fair market rent, for rent reasonableness, for having rental assistance agreements in place with landlords, and for ensuring that the clients you assist have legal leases. So lots to think about there. Okay, more requirements. These are a little more general overall for the program. There are certainly some requirements around data collection and reporting. There are matching contributions for the ESG program, which we'll touch on a little more in a moment. There are requirements about documentation of homelessness and at risk of homelessness. There are requirements for confidentiality, as you might expect. Accessibility, certainly for shelters in particular. Termination of assistance, policies you want to follow there. Coordination with other homeless services in your community. Access to mainstream services and resources. There are particular requirements for religious organizations and for coordinated entry and for involvement of homeless individuals, and development of written standards for determining assistance. That's a lot. It's a lot to think about. So again, if these are new, really would encourage you to delve in a little further on some of the other resources we've talked about. I'm going to pause for just a moment and see if any questions have come in. Okay, we did get a question about what category is transitional housing in. And so I think we covered that. My guess is that question came in before we touched on that. But again, that would be in shelter. So if you're providing transitional housing, it's only allowed if you received that ESG grant back in 2010. If so, then the category you apply in is shelter. Okay, let's see. Now I see another question related to transitional housing. So I'm going to quickly read that. For the transitional housing or shelter designation, if an agency operates both programs, does it have to have received funding during 2010, or only if they are asking for funds to support both programs? If it's just a shelter program, should the answer to question 8A on the application be no? Okay, so that's kind of a longish question there. I think to answer that, I probably need the actual application in front of me, which, let me see here, I think I may have it. Okay. Now, okay, so I just want to make sure I understand the question. I think the question is an agency provides transitional housing, but that's not what they're asking for funds to do. Now, if you provide transitional housing at your agency, but that's not what your application is about, then it really doesn't apply to you at all. This is only for an agency that's applying for funds to support their transitional shelter program. If you are applying for funds in any way, any amount of funds to support a transitional shelter program, then you do need to mark yes for 8A on the application, and really it's only then eligible if you receive those funds in 2010. For any particular agency that's not sure and wants to confirm, please do feel free to reach out and we can double check that for you. If you received funds in the last 2 or 3 years for ESG for that program, then I'm sure we've checked it before and you should be good to go. Okay, I think that's all the questions I've see so far. I did get a question earlier about the phone and the audio. Hopefully this person was able to connect by phone, and it is, again, a little different than the way we've occasionally done webinars in the past. But hopefully that's working for most folks. Okay. All right, back to our slides. Just what we want, more requirements. So these are almost like the cross-cutting big federal regulations that lots and lots of programs are subject to. And so ESG does sort of follow along with many of these general overarching HUD or other federal agency requirements. So non-discrimination and equal opportunity, fair housing, absolutely. The issues of fair housing that frequently come up with shelters are about service dogs. That's one that we see. And there are just a couple other issues there that can be somewhat challenging to deal with. But certainly that's the ESG requirement. Non-discrimination by age, affirmative action, affirmative outreach, job training and employment for low-income residents, just very in rare cases would come up for ESG. Uniform administrative requirements, that's about just kind of general federal grant management guidelines. And guidelines for use of funds, so we follow those. There's Solid Waste Disposal Act, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. That always seems like an odd one in there, and so every few months or so I have to research that and remind myself of how it applies to ESG. I think it's about contracting if you buy large equipment, which hardly ever would happen with ESG. So really that one doesn't come in too often either, I don't believe. Drug-free workplace, agencies receiving federal funds do need to have a policy in place for that. and then limitation on contracting. And I think that one's about agencies that may be disbarred. So if you're entering into large, significant sort of subcontracts with your ESG funds, then you shouldn't be working with agencies that have been federally disbarred. Again, it doesn't come up too often, but these are just some of the things you need to be aware of with an ESG grant. Okay. All right, data collection. Data collection is kind of a big piece. Certainly HUD with all their programs is really emphasizing making decisions based on data, wanting to measure performance and improve performance based on system level data. So certainly we do a lot of that with the ESG program. The way data collection works is there are a number of data elements that agencies are required to ask clients, and then clients have the option to answer. They certainly do not have to. They can refuse any information, and services should never be conditional on providing the information. But agencies are required to ask for that information. And so the way it typically works for most agencies is they enter data in the Iowa Service Point Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS. And as you can see down here, that is the Institute for Community Alliances. That's the agency that manages that system. So if you are new to this program at all, you would want and received a grant, you'd want to connect with them and make sure that you're using the network and make sure that you're trained on that. If you're an agency that is primarily a provider of domestic violence victim services, then it's a little different for data collection given the concerns about confidentiality and some different federal restrictions on that. So currently, most agencies receiving ESG funds in 2016 use the Iowa Service Point DV database. That's also administered through the Institute for Community Alliances, but it is not the HMIS. So a little different, little different parameters on how that works there. The other database that we're looking at for next year is Client Track, and that's through the Crime Victim Assistance Division of the Attorney General's Office. And so they, of course, administer the most significant portion of funding for many DV agencies. And they're working on getting a new database up and going that we think will be in place in the next couple months. It's difficult to determine what our requirements will be for next year without having that system up and running and knowing how it works for producing the required federal reports. So we kind of looked at this issue as far as putting it out for public comment and trying to have a response in time for the competition. But it's still a little bit just in flux because we just don't know yet. It's just, we've heard a lot about this database for a long time now, but it's been a long time coming, and it's just not there yet. So, so we're kind of waiting there. We'll certainly be in touch with everyone as soon as we have more information on how we think this is going to work. Apricot is another database that some DV agencies use this year, and it has not worked. It's been, oh, those poor agencies trying to use it. It just has not worked well at all this year. It cannot produce the required reports. So it really is not an option for next year. So please do contact me if you have concerns there. But that's just, I think that's just where we're at. So we need to be able to meet HUD's reporting requirements there. So that's how we see data collection happening this next year. I know some questions, still leave some questions. Certainly must follow confidentiality and security policies for data collection. That sort of underpins everything we do with data. Okay, next slide, data reporting. Of course, doesn't do a lot of good to collect the data unless we report on it and then use it in some way. So the way we do this, we're required on our end with Iowa Finance Authority to report to HUD on the ESG program once a year. And that's through the, it's called the CAPER. It's the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. For us to be able to do that report, we have to know that agencies are keeping up with their data and reporting on a continual basis throughout the year. So we do that in a couple different ways. First, we have data quality and completeness. And those are submitted at least quarterly to the Iowa Finance Authority with draw requests. And they can be submitted monthly if you submit monthly draw requests, but the minimum is quarterly. The next kind of report that we use is a performance report, and that has different kinds of questions as far as outcomes. It's based far more on what actually happens with the clients that you're serving. And so that's a report that's due also at least quarterly, but that one is submitted directly to the Institute for Community Alliances. Okay, just a little bit more on coordinated entry. That's kind of always a big topic for ESG and for the community overall. So ESG-funded agencies are required to participate, and that sort of requirement for ESG really kicks in when the continuum of care in your community has an approved system in place. And so that kind of varies throughout the state. So if you're an agency serving here in Des Moines, then yes, you have an approved system in place, and so you must participate. Even if you're not getting ESG funds through the city, if you're getting ESG funds through the state, you must participate in Des Moines' coordinated intake or coordinated entry system. If you're in the Sioux City continuum of care, then your system is in progress and you want to just maintain really good contact in your community with your COC to make sure you know where they're at with the development of that system and if you should be using it at this point. If you're in Council Bluffs, then of course you're with the Omaha continuum of care. And yes, there's a functioning system, so I don't know a lot about the details, but I'm sure you should be participating. And then if you're in anywhere else in Iowa, then you're in the balance of state continuum of care, and that system is in progress. And there are some elements that really should be in place and required at this point, but there's a lot of work to be done ahead of us. Certainly more information will be coming out this year because I think things will start to happen a little quicker with coordinated entry this year. Okay, that is all we're going to cover as far as general ESG requirements, and we're going to go into this 2017 competition next, and I'm going to pause just one more time for any additional questions. Okay, and I think we're good on questions, so we'll keep going. All right, this competition. So ESG in Iowa, there are 3 total federal grants made each year to the state, or us, Des Moines and Sioux City. And so agencies across the state can apply for the state ESG funds, even if you're located in Des Moines or Sioux City. Even if you get ESG funds directly from one of those cities, you can also still apply to the state program. And let's see. Oh, just if you are reviewing HUD materials on ESG and you see a difference in grantees and sub-grantees, just so you're aware of what that means. IFA is the direct grantee from HUD, and then agencies receiving funding to provide the services are considered sub-grantees. So just so that's not too confusing. All right, so our process of developing this competition, as we always do, we really work hard to solicit comments and feedback from stakeholders, and so we go through a public comment process. And so we put out written materials for public comments, and I think we started that process in April, and then we had a public hearing for any oral comments, and that was on April 27th, and then comments were due by May 6th. We received several really good and thoughtful comments, and we really appreciate that. That's very important to us. So we will be posting all the comments that we received and then our responses to those comments on our website within the next day or two. Comments ranged from, there were some comments about the limitation on funds for each agency. There were some comments about domestic violence data systems. Again, that's just a challenging topic right now to figure out the best way forward. There were some really good comments and input on that. There were some comments about transitional housing through ESG. So again, we really appreciate it. We would love more. We love the input. So and we do make adjustments to our application based on those comments. Okay, let's see. The calendar year 2017 competition. The deadline will be, just jumping right into it, Friday, June 24th at 4:30 p.m. It's an online system to apply, which we'll take a look at in a moment. It does not allow late submissions. And don't wait till the last day. Several users in the system at one time do make it slower, and you just never know what might happen that last day. Please do not wait. Please get it done as early as you can. That allows time for questions, allows time for additional information. It's just, please just don't wait to the very last day. June 24th, for anyone who's in the Balanced State Continuum of Care that happens to be a renewal applicant for that program, it's the same deadline, which I don't love that timing. It's not great for us. I know it's not great for those applicants that are applying for both programs, but it is just how the timing worked out this year. So that's where that is. So it allows about a month from now, and certainly agencies have had access to our draft competition materials for probably over a month now. So nothing that's too new. If agencies review those materials, it'll be very similar to what was proposed, and so kind of had some warning there, I guess, of what's coming. Okay, award period, it is the calendar year that we operate on, so 2017. So no extensions are allowed. You just, please just request what you can really use. If you don't use your funds, that's okay. They go back into the general pot. We don't lose them, but we then kind of recapture them to use in the following year. But it is really important to us that agencies spend what they've sort of asked for and committed to. If not, another agency could have been using it that year. So try to keep that in mind. Okay, grant awards and amounts. This is just like last year. We're allowing a minimum grant application for $30,000, maximum of $150,000. We are retaining our $100,000 single category maximum. That means that, let's say you're an agency that provides shelter and you also want to do rapid rehousing. So you could apply for up to $100,000 in one or another of those categories, and then another $50,000 in the other category for a total maximum of $150,000. The data collection reporting of allowance of 5% and the administration allowance of 2% must be within that $150,000, so they're not over and above that. We have approximately $2.4 million available. We think we'll probably make, my guess is around 30 awards. We made 29 awards this last year, so we have about the same amount of money. It'll probably be fairly consistent with that. Last year was extremely competitive. Last year was our most competitive round. So there were actually a number of great programs that were not funded last year. So that's just where we're at right now. We have limited funds. We did get one comment regarding our application maximum, or kind of category maximum of $100,000. That was an agency that was interested in expanding their rapid rehousing program. And we'll have a response to that online, but just really briefly, I think where we're at with that is we really want to see a development toward a more coordinated system of kind of regions or local areas working together better, and we're working on developing that for a different program. And once we have that, I think it'll make more sense to have maybe larger grants in rapid rehousing, as long as we know that agencies are covering a larger geographic area and or serving a broader population of those in need. So that's where we're at. Maybe next year we'll take another look at that category limit. Okay, matching for ESG. It's a 75% match required. So if you look at HUD materials on ESG, it's a 1-to-1 or 100% match. We've been able to reduce that to 75% match because we use our shelter assistance funds to help offset our federal 1-to-1 obligation. And we do that at the grantee or IFA level, one of the state levels. Therefore, we pass on just 75% of the match requirement to grantees. So not a huge amount, but I suppose it helps a little. So there is a small allowance for an agency to request a waiver of more of the match than just that 25% that's waived. So that is allowed. You can ask, but if lots of agencies ask or have that need, then of course that's difficult to provide because we're very limited on that. So move on there. Okay, ESG and SAF. If you're an agency interested in the Shelter Assistance Fund, it does support similar things as ESG, but only in the shelter category. So it's just a little more limited. It can't do homelessness prevention or rapid rehousing or street outreach. So, but if you're an agency just focused on shelter, and certainly that program is a state program, it's easier to administer. There are just fewer federal requirements to deal with. Certainly we follow similar rules, but it's just different, that it's not a federal program. So that's an option. And actually, last year we had fewer applicants for the Shelter Assistance Fund, so most applicants ended up receiving most of what they asked for. So that was kind of nice with that program last year. As for our timing, our goal is to make ESG awards in early August. That's our IFA board that makes ESG awards. And that's their scheduled meeting, and that is what we're targeting. So we'll see, we'll try for that. And then the Shelter Assistance Fund competition depends on that a little. We don't like to open it too much before we make ESG awards, just in case an agency applies for ESG, isn't funded, and then decides to later on apply for the Shelter Assistance Fund. Okay, and then certainly you can't get both for one time period, one or the other. Okay, talked a little bit about that. Should your agency wait and only apply for Shelter Assistance Fund? Certainly an option. It just really depends on your agency and your planning. Okay, grant management requirements. So there's an initial grant training. The way we did that last year was an in-person training that took about half a day. And so not sure if we'll repeat that again or if we'll do kind of an online option or something different, but that can take a little bit of time. We have quarterly required conference calls for ESG that take about an hour each. Funds for ESG are paid on a reimbursement basis, so you have to pay out the funds before you can be reimbursed by IFA. We do require at least quarterly reimbursement or draw requests with lots of documentation of what was spent. We talked about the data completion reports and the quarterly performance reports. We do occasional on-site monitoring at your agency. If we do that, we usually let you know in advance, not always, but usually. And usually those visits last about 3 to 4 hours, so somewhat significant. And then we do the year-end reporting, which we talked about a little. Actually, agencies using the Service Point HMIS system really don't have to do a whole lot more for year-end reporting right now because all that data is already in HMIS and we can get it straight from the Institute for Community Alliances, which works out tremendously well. Agencies that are not on the Service Point system do have to submit data directly to us, and it's lengthy, and there are problems if the data doesn't match up within categories. So I don't want to make light of that requirement that in addition to the monthly or quarterly reporting, that is kind of a big thing at the end of the year that's going to be required for agencies if there are any agencies that aren't using that Service Point system. Okay, moving on, application process, and I'm going to again just briefly break and see if we have any questions. Okay, one question that came in is there going to be a time for comment on the staff competition, and I don't know that we typically put that out for public comment. It is just so similar to ESG in the shelter category, so basically we move forward with staff along the lines of what we're doing for ESG. Just because there's not a formal comment period though doesn't mean we don't want input. We do, so anybody that has ideas or questions or input for Shelter Assistance Fund, please feel free to let us know at any time. We love that input. Okay, application process. All right, the HAP system, that's what we call our application system. It is, again, entirely online, which we really like. It works really well for us. We're able to pull data from there very easily, and that's very helpful. So it's a homeless assistance program system. And let's see, here is the link to the system, or you can find it through our ESG main webpage. If you look in that 2017 program, it's not there right this second. It'll probably be there tomorrow. It is, the direct link is in the 2016 program currently. So this is where you go to actually log in and start your application. Okay. Okay, so again, that's kind of generally where you'll find that link on a normal day if you're not in the presentation slides here. That's about where it'll be. And that's what we just saw when we linked in. So if you don't have a HAP system account already, there is a link right there on that page for instructions to create an account. You can use the same account with username and password as last year. And I think if you forget your password, just follow the normal prompts to retrieve that. So the way that system works is you start a new application, you navigate at the left, there's a competition information or instructions section that you want to start with, and then you can save the application and come back to it. You can print it out if that's helpful to you, etc. And of course, you want to make sure to hit submit when it is complete. I think at the end of this webinar, because I don't think I'm set up to actually get into this system the way I have it right now, I think when we get to the end of our slides, I'll go ahead and log in if I'm able to from this computer here, and we'll just go through a little bit of the application. But I'll go ahead and get through the slides first, I think. Okay, creating a new application. This is what it looks like. So when you get to this page, this is after you've logged in. So you create a new application right here, and it's going to say 2017 Emergency Solutions Grant, and then you hit Add Application. Okay, and this is what the system looks like once you get in. And again, this is from last year because we don't have the resources posted quite yet online. Almost ready. So competition information, that's where you find the overall information, applicant profile, and on down, you would just complete each of these items here on the left. When everything turns to a green check mark on the left, you know you're good to go. You've finished it all. You still have to submit. You still have to hit submit. So that's this button up here. Do not leave your application without hitting submit when you're done. I certainly would recommend that you also print the application and file it away for your record. Okay, new and different. So there are some questions or some differences in the questions throughout the application. We did, again, try to call those out a little bit in the document we put out requesting comments. One thing that we changed is the structure of the competition priorities. So last year, and probably the last 2 or 3 years actually, we've had a system where we have 100 regular points, and then we would add on about 12 to 15 bonus points. And the bonus points were sort of seen as particular priorities of that particular competition. So for example, last year's priorities for bonus points were targeted services for veterans, targeted services for, I think, families or youth was one. One was about serving the literally homeless, and then one was providing services in a rural area. So if you don't see those things in the application, they haven't disappeared. Mostly those are all still retained, but not as bonus questions. So we see those as just really integral to the program itself. So they are just part of the normal sections. So it's not that they're any less important to us. They just have been pulled into to other places. So let's see. Just going back to that document that is posted currently, the document that outlays our competition plan and asks for comments. We do talk a little bit about the proposed changes there. So I won't go into those too much because I think mostly they're laid out in that document. And then differences in the questions throughout, mostly those are minor differences in kind of wording or how we frame a question. I don't think any huge changes or surprises there. Okay, HMIS report instructions. So we will be posting those again today or tomorrow. Those are ready to go. That's for HMIS agencies or the Service Point DV agencies. So those report instructions will be posted soon online, and the same place as all the other items will be. Just some helpful hints on the application process itself. So what you can do is use Word to spell check, grammar check, etc., and then copy your answers into the system. So that can work well because our system itself doesn't have spell check. And it's also a way to make sure if by chance you time out of the system that you don't lose your work. So I believe we set the timing a little differently this year for the system. I think last year might have been about 30 minutes, and you would time out if you didn't refresh or have any activity saved. This year, I believe we've changed that to 90 minutes, so there's a little more time. One thing you might want to do when you first log into the system, go straight to that exhibits page, which is the last page, and just make sure, because sometimes that might take a little bit more time to get one of those documents in order. Maybe it's that you need a signature from your board chair or executive director. Maybe it's that you need a certificate of local government approval if you're a shelter. And that can take a little bit of time because maybe you're working with the schedule of your city manager's office or your mayor's office or something like that. So make sure to go to that last page. Or another one is the Secretary of State Certificate of Standing. If you need to do anything to renew that certificate or there's any problem in getting your current certificate, you want to know that early. So we would recommend you go to the exhibits page very early on. And you want to pay attention to the point totals. Those are listed after each question in the application, so you can find out what's worth more, what are the priorities, where to maybe spend more of your time. The review structure of this application, this is kind of important to know because I think it does change how people frame their application and how they respond in individual sections. But every reviewer, we have work on scoring, and we assemble a review team of about 8 external reviewers. Every reviewer reviews every application submitted, but only in one section. So for example, they're only going to review the performance section, or they're only going to review the experience and capacity section. So if you've talked about something in another section and you're thinking, oh, I don't need to reference that or explain that because I already explained it elsewhere, you may want to rethink that and just make sure that you're being really clear and explaining things sufficiently in each section for different reviewers. You want to give specific examples, of course. You want to have another person review your application before submitting it. Make sure you don't leave any questions blank. Some questions are required and you won't be able to move on without submitting an answer. Some questions are not required, but you're going to lose points if you don't put something there in some cases. So want to make sure that you don't leave anything out. And let's see, remember the guidelines for the response length. And we have that in there several times in the application as a reminder, but we really don't want pages and pages of information for each question. And I don't think that's helpful anyways for applicants because reviewers tend to tune out and it just can be overwhelming and too much. So, so please do pay attention to those timing or to those response guidelines that we provide. And then, of course, remember the deadline for applications is Friday, June 24th at 4:30 p.m. Okay, common missteps to avoid, similar to helpful hints, I guess, but these are things not to do. So the reviewed financial statements or the audits, that is a hard and fast requirement. If your agency doesn't have an audit or you do not have independently reviewed financial statements from a CPA that's not connected to your agency, it's not your board chair, it's not, it's not your executive director, it's not your, finance person, it's an independent CPA. If you do not have that, you cannot apply for ESG or Shelter Assistance Fund for that matter. So that's something to be very aware of. And it cannot be just a letter from an auditor or a CPA firm saying, hey, yeah, we're going to do the audit, it's coming, it's just late. It's got to be done. So we allow a little bit of time. I think we're pretty generous in the time. I think we allow like 10 months or something past the end of a fiscal year to have your audit in place. But once we're past that sort of grace period or time to have your audit, it really needs to be done and be able to submit that for your application. Okay, we get it, yeah. Okay, financials, I think we already talked about that, financial statements. And again, just having financial statements, like maybe you put together, let's see, your income, sheet, your balance statement, whatever those are, if those haven't been reviewed, it's not enough. So let us know if you have questions there. We're happy to talk you through. I'm certainly no accounting expert, although we do have an accounting expert on our team now. So so we'll be happy to talk you through what's needed there. When you have your audit or financial review done, make sure you include the management letter. That's important as well. And let's see, another thing you don't want to do. So failing to identify and explain your audit findings in the application narrative. So let's say you do have a finding in your audit. Well, that's not a deal breaker. We don't say that you can't have any findings whatsoever in order to get a grant. That's not what it is. But what we really don't like is if there are findings listed and then we ask you about that and you don't tell us about that, or some others are not included. So those really need to match up. So I think there are some very good explanations, some very good reasons why some things are more challenging. But one thing that we see, especially for small agencies, is lack of sort of separation of duties. So those things are okay, but please just do disclose and then share. If your agency is working on resolving those, then share that as well. Uploading the wrong attachments, that happens as well. So once you've attached something and uploaded something, you should always be able to go in there and check what you actually uploaded and make sure it's what you intended to upload. Make sure it opens. Make sure it's not just missing pages or upside down or unreadable, or any number of concerns. So make sure that those attachments in the exhibit section are really coming through the way they're supposed to. Another thing you don't want to do, ask for an amount outside the acceptable range. And again, that range is $30,000 to $150,000. So asking for something outside that range just makes it difficult to even really review because it just doesn't fit the guidelines of the application. Including a 990 or financial statements that are too old or out of date. The 990 is that tax filing that nonprofits have to file every year. And there are some exemptions, I know. Certainly if you're a city or a county, you don't have to do that. Or there are some exemptions for faith-based organizations or that are primarily churches. But if your agency is generally required to file one, please don't give us one from 2009 or 2011, or it really needs to be current as well. And then sometimes what we see for that Secretary of State Certificate of Standing, sometimes people think that what we're looking for there is just evidence of nonprofit status. So they'll send us an IRS nonprofit determination letter, and that's not what we want. That's not the requirement. That's important to have that, but what we're looking for is a current certificate of standing that shows you're currently registered and have filed your reports and all of that on time with the Iowa Secretary of State. Okay, let's see. And questions, Amber Lewis at iowa.gov, Judy Hartman at iowa.gov, Carol Vipond, our newest staff member, is at carol.vipond at iowa.gov. We can put that out as well. And you'll start to see her email. If you ever get emails from us, you'll start to see her more and more there, and so she'll be available as well. Okay, that was kind of a mouthful. Lots of talking by one person. So I'm going to go back to questions here and see how we're doing there, and then I may still try to log into that application. I know we're bumping up to 2 o'clock here, so I don't want to keep people on if we've covered most everything. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So this is your chance. Please do feel free to submit any. We'll hang out here and see if any come through. And then I'm going to see if I can log into the application system while I'm waiting for any questions to come in. And if I can, I'll just walk folks through a couple things there. Please don't feel obligated to stay on. I think we've covered most of the basics here, but that will be our plan for the next few minutes. So if you do log off, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to send any final questions by email as well. That works. Thank you. Okay, and if you're listening still and watching what I'm doing, this is not how you would access this system. That's just our internal way to access the system. So, but this is how I'm going to pull it up just so we can get to it and view how it will look once you log in. Okay, let's see. More back-end stuff here. We'll preview the survey. Okay, so if you can still see our screen, this is what it looks like when you log in. This is our current application that's just about ready to go. Actually, the system probably would accept applications right now. I think officially we opened it this morning. So we should be able to log in and get to this screen here when you open a new application. And so competition information, all the different sections here that you're going to want to fill out. This is that exhibits page that I recommended you go to first and see what's required here. Make sure that you can meet all these requirements. And then program design, that's our first one. That's where we used to have the bonus points as well, and that's where I was mentioning we've sort of woven those throughout the application in different spots now. And we have some kind of new questions here just to be really specific as far as beds available for your program. We have kind of links throughout where you can get more information from HUD about a particular subject. And then we go to experience and capacity. This is where we have that length guideline I mentioned, where we're looking for approximately 300 words for most narrative responses, or 1,500 characters with no spaces, or 1,800 characters with spaces. So, and responses that are unnecessarily lengthy may lose points. So I don't anticipate our reviewers are going to be counting every character or every word each time, but I think if it's excessively long, they are looking for that as part of their scoring. Okay, this section's quite similar to previous years. One new question about the Iowa Quality Standards, and there's a link there online where you can get to that. Community partnerships and need, that length guideline is the same on all pages. Some of this is just checking the boxes to see what fits. This is about contact information for your planning group. There's a couple new questions there to get some really specific information about different planning groups. And this is kind of a new question here, trying to ascertain what kinds of services are available in your local or regional community. And just really about how your local area is planning together on a range of different topics. And this is that question about rural services that used to be a bonus question. We just pulled it into here, but that is still included. Performance is the next one, and this is fairly similar to previous years. And then the way you answered this, that's going to depend on what kind of program you do. A little bit about participation in this year's point-in-time count, that January count of sheltered and unsheltered persons experiencing homelessness. And then the last screen that we haven't looked at, budget and grants management, that's 15 points. And this is something ISA staff typically reviews this page. This is a little bit about the history of grant management in your agency with these programs, and also about your budget request. This is where you would talk about your audit and any of the findings in your audit. So that's the basic application. Should look really similar to previous years. This is that print button. You can do that anytime. Save and exit, and then submit when you're all done, once all of these are green. So we will go back to our webinar one last time to see if anybody has submitted questions. Okay, oh, we did get a question here. Will LIHEAP be an allowable match this funding year? And it looks like I skipped over that accidentally earlier on. So LIHEAP is allowable. I think somebody submitted that as a comment as well earlier, and so we'll have a little more lengthy response to that posted online soon. LIHEAP can be a little challenging to use as matching funds, so it needs to be very well documented. And the problem with LIHEAP is that anybody receiving it, any of those funds that you're counting for ESG as match, it has to be that clients receiving that assistance would have qualified or do qualify for ESG assistance, meaning that they were homeless or they would be homeless without the assistance. So it can't be just a low-income household in need of utility assistance. It has to actually be, they have to qualify for ESG assistance. So that's the challenge with LIHEAP. And so it's probably not all, if you're an agency that does a lot of LIHEAP, it's most likely only a small-ish portion of your clients receiving LIHEAP that actually qualify to use that portion as match for ESG. There was a question about SAF. Is the Shelter Assistance Fund going to be limited to $50,000 this year? And yes, that is what we anticipate again this year. There's a question about the 990. The question is, does a 990 count for the independent audit requirement? And the answer is no. The 990 is different. That is tax filing with the IRS, and it's certainly a very important report and provides lots of good information on the agency, but it is not the same as a review or audit of financial statements. Okay, there's a question on the application limits, and so I think this question is very specific to this agency, and they're talking a little bit about their scores to last year's application. And there is that challenge between trying to provide really specific, good examples that illuminate what you're wanting to convey without being really lengthy. And so the question is there a happy medium? And yes, we're trying for the happy medium. It is hard to arrive at. So we do think that those application response lengths are important, the guidelines, the kind of limits. If there's a particular area where an agency needs to go a little over the 300 words, that's okay. Again, it's not a hard and fast limit. Lots of systems will lock you out when you have too many words. Ours won't. So we try to be just a little bit flexible in that way. But it can be hard to arrive at that happy medium as referenced. So I appreciate that challenge, and I do hear what you're asking there. And maybe in the future we'd move to having a hard limit on characters or words, and maybe that would be more helpful across the board. But at this point we don't do that. Agencies are so different. Some are very large, et cetera. So we just that's where we're at now. So. Okay, question on what are the current requirements for children sharing a room as far as gender and age go? And the question is, can an 8-year-old girl share a room with a 1-year-old boy? And that is not something that the ESG regulations deal with at all. So if there's a concern there, maybe on a kind of individual basis, certainly we'd be happy to talk over with your agency if you're struggling with something, developing a policy like that. We can certainly talk that over with you and maybe point you in the direction of some other agencies who've developed policies regarding room sharing, and hopefully that could be helpful to you. But I don't have guidance on that. That's not something that we've developed regulations on at all. Okay, I think we may have covered all the questions submitted. So we really appreciate the questions, and thanks again for your participation. Good luck on the application, and we look forward to working with you in the coming weeks. I'm looking for a recording. Do you see it? There should be a place about a recording.
What about this light? Green light?
This one?
Yeah.